Hey, beautiful souls. Welcome to Woo Girl Radio, your weekly podcast where I interview experts in their field on spirituality, motivation, mindset, manifesting, all things woo woo spiritual, and how to uplevel our lives because who doesn't want to grow and progress in this wild, chaotic world? I am so excited to bring to you today's episode. I interviewed David, also known as Fauxtivational Speaker, on TikTok and Instagram. He has grown his following to over 165,000 followers and growing. And I'm so excited to share with you. It feels like I'm talking to a friend in this episode. So I hope you feel like you're amongst friends as you listen today. We really go into spiritual awakening and everyone's own personal spiritual journey. And we really dive into what it's like to have your own discernment, forge your own path, and really how we can have our own unique awakening experiences. Because what I experience is going to be different than what David experiences, which is different from what you're going to experience. But at the end of the day, we can always bring it back to loving on ourselves more and having more compassion and space for ourselves. So we go into so many amazing topics. It's a really natural, lovely chat we have, and I think there's so much value in hearing other people's journeys and understanding how we can support ourselves more through the awakening and intuition process. So enjoy today's episode. Make sure you follow David on TikTok or YouTube or Instagram, wherever you like, and make sure you hit subscribe so you can get new episodes every single week to wherever you get your podcasts or to YouTube. We release new episodes every Thursday on all podcast channels, and we also release YouTube videos a few days early. So if you want to get early access, go to Lionheart Leo on YouTube and make sure you subscribe and hit that bell.
Hey.
Hey, so nice to see you.
You too. What's going on? So nice to see you. I guess sort of meet you in person, sort of. Is that?
Yeah, I guess so. I feel like I know you already because I see you all the time on my feed, but
Same.
yeah. Oh, that's awesome. How's your day going so far?
It's great, man. Just get some work done. Had an audition, did that. Feeling good. Just excited.
Nice. Are you an actor then? I feel like I should know this, but
Yeah.
okay, sweet. I technically am too. I just haven't been working in the industry for a long time, but
Oh, word? That's really cool.
yeah, I was on Untold Stories of the ER a couple times. Love that show. It's
That's
so cheesy.
amazing. Yes.
Like, what would you like our viewers to know about you? Like, how did you get into spirituality? Like, take me on the journey of what your life has been up to this point.
Oh gosh. Well, when I was one, I had my first memory. It was great. No. So my name's David. I'm on TikTok as Fauxtivational Speaker and Instagram as Fauxtivational Speaker and YouTube. Jesus, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube as Fauxtivational Speaker. And yeah, man, I'm a sort of a motivational speaker, bit of an awakening coach. Do that sometimes for folks as well. Yeah, I'm just so as far as my how I got here, how we got here. Yeah, I mean, I think I have a pretty basic like story. Like mine's pretty like down the line. So I just did a podcast and somebody asked me that question and it was like super long-winded, so I'm looking to adjust. Uh Essentially just it was, trauma. I sort of had that moment where you feel like you've sort of fully identified with all the stuff outside of you and you get sort of that thing that you think you want. For me, I was an actor. I still am, but it was that point when I had the opportunity to only act. And I looked around and I was like, oh, I'm supposed to be happy now. We did it. I'm not happy. What's going on? And if you don't know anything about acting, like it's a lot of unemployment. So even though I didn't have to technically work, I probably should have been, but I didn't have to. I was spending a lot of time by myself and in that sort of depressive state of like, how come I'm not happy? I got the stuff. I'm not happy. Out of that sort of sparked sort of something else. It kind of went self-helpy for a bit, as I think everybody kind of does. And then
Yeah.
it had that a few pretty intense moments sober. I like to say that because I mean, no judgment if that's not you, but
Yeah.
I think I want to put that out there because I think a lot of the time it can get a little like, oh man, what'd you do? Just a bunch of mushrooms. I had a lot of very sober, sort of expanded sort of experiences that switched everything for me. And upon becoming more curious and looking inward with those experiences, I came to sort of the conclusion or the awareness that expressing it and helping people on their journeys was sort of a part of something that was always going to be me. So
I love that. So it
yeah,
sounds like it happened really organically for you, which is, I
yeah,
think, not talked about a lot. Like, I think when you're scrolling through TikTok or Instagram, it's like, I had this huge awakening moment and I'm going to tell you about it. And it's like drama, drama, drama.
hmm
But sometimes awakening, I think, can just be like waking up to the fact that we are what we are, like it can be really gentle and subtle and
I love it.
doesn't
Well,
necessarily have
I
to
don't know.
be
I don't know if mine was super gentle, but because
fair.
I did have that because I didn't, I wasn't aware that it was a spiritual awakening for maybe 2 years. I didn't hear the
Mhm.
word, the phrase
Mm.
spiritual awakening. So I spent sort of that 2 year in that sort of, and I guess somebody called it, it's like kind of the bliss phase. It's like you have this massive pop. It's like the first scoop of ice cream, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
And if you don't have things sort of in place to help integrate that, that can be a challenge for a lot of people. And
Yeah.
it was challenging for me because it definitely was like I spent a lot of time at home just being like, I don't know what's going on. I'm seeing shapes. I'm like, I know things that like I just it's very strange when you start knowing stuff that you're like, I don't know how I know this, but I know it. And that was a challenge. But over time, yes, it did. It was sort of integrating that. And I guess for me also, I think what I want to just get out there is I think it's important for people to understand I a lot of the context that I ended up finding was I had to go get that. Like it wasn't I wasn't on the path of like, oh, I wanted to go to a yoga class and I gotta reach enlightenment. This is a thing. I want to open my third eye. It was like it all kind of happened, and my journey has been sort of finding little nuggets to help explain it to you and other people, so I can sort of speak their language, which has been a lot of fun for me.
I love that. I love that you're sharing it with people too, because when I went through my last like bigger spiritual awakening, I was very recluse, and everyone was like, "Where'd you go?" And I was just at home. I was unemployed at the time. I'd just come back from a meditation retreat, and I dived into YouTube. I went on like a YouTube spiral. But I think for everyone listening and watching today, it's really like finding what resonates for you on your journey. And I love that you're sharing with people on TikTok and on your feed and everything, YouTube, all that, because like I think we need those things to grasp onto when we're trying to awaken ourselves. So creating content is such a beautiful way to share that with people.
Yeah, I definitely appreciated the people who were doing it, in the sort of beginning, because time starts to mean a little less the longer you go. And I'm sure you know that. Actually, I'm curious
Yeah.
about your thing. I got you. I feel like you're in my mind. I feel like you're from what I can tell from your content. You're like sort of classically trained. Like it feels like you, you know what I mean?
I've
In
never
my
heard it said that way, and I love
in my head, I'm like, what? In my head, you're like the Malfoys, and I'm Hermione in this thing. Like I'm just like, oh, I don't know, we'll see.
that. Oh
Like
my gosh, that's so funny.
you came up like I'm a Muggle, and you're like you came up with that.
Like full on wizard family.
Yeah.
It's actually funny because my parents are both scientists. My brother's an engineer. My mom is also a shamanic practitioner. So on one hand, I was raised in this, and in another, I was like trying to deny spirituality my whole life because I was trying so hard to be normal. So
Oh
when I
yeah.
started out like 3 years old, I remember seeing ghosts above my bed and getting freaked out by like all these faces. And I remember being 5 and yelling into the air, like go find the light, cross over, stop bothering me, right? And so like
Oh
here I
man.
am, this kid like in a very like kind of like middle upper class suburban neighborhood, like yelling into the sky for like ghosts to find their way home. But I realized pretty quickly once I entered school that like that was not normal
Mhm.
and I would not be accepted for that necessarily in my peer group in suburban like
Oh
middle
god.
class neighborhood, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I suppressed it for most of my life. It was still there, it was still present. I didn't fully disbelieve it, but I really had to go through a phase when I was about like 15, 16, 17, where the trauma started to pile up and I needed more help than what like a counselor or just like an adult could give me. And so I realized that whenever my mom did shamanic and spiritual work for me, that's when my life started working. So I spent so much time denying it that I eventually just had to embrace it because it just worked. Like if I had a problem, the shamanism and the spirituality would fix it. So like by anecdotal evidence, I just had to start embracing it, and that's when I became fully trained. That's when I started embracing my gifts a little bit more. And then my life started working better too. So I attracted better friends and better jobs and better people and all of that. So it's been really like an interesting journey for me because I spent so much time pushing it away, trying to be
Yeah.
cool, trying to be logical, trying to prove if it's real or not. And when I first started journeying, my guides kept turning the lights off on me. So like I would be like hearing things and experiencing things and having like kind of spiritual experiences, but I couldn't fully get there and I was getting really frustrated. And one of my guides was like, "We're only showing you as much as you believe. So kind of like get on with it."
Mm.
And I was like, "Oh, like they know me so well."
Mhm.
So that was the moment that was kind of the turning moment in my kind of spiritual journey as I was like, "Oh shit, they know. Like they know this is real. They know what's going on in my head. I have to change or just decide to not be spiritual, I guess." So I chose I chose to go on the journey and take the trip. But
Yeah.
yeah, so in some ways I have been classically trained, like the Malfoy, the wizarding family, but in some ways I've been trying really hard to push that away.
That's so
So
interesting. I find like for me, like further down the journey, the more I look back, I guess it's weird to talk about, like, because I'm sure you experienced this sort of as your awareness expands, for some reason, like your memory expands in a really just trippy way. And so I remember like just how psychedelic my childhood was. And it's so interesting to like associate like walking down the street now and like looking at a leaf for like 20 minutes and being like, whoa, this is crazy. And then remembering, oh, I used to do this shit a lot when I was a kid. Like
yeah,
this was always the thing, which makes explaining how you got here always hilarious because you're like, it's always been this. I just was like, there was a period of time where I was like, maybe not. Maybe this
yeah,
isn't it. But it really has kind of always been some sort of version of this for us. And I think that's really it makes it a little more settling for me when I think about like, oh, sharing stuff or stuff like that. Like I have the memory to go, oh, when I was 4 years old having like an existential conversation with my mom about the nature of religion on the way home from church and her being like, what are we doing right now? Like I know that for a fact. So I'm like, okay,
yeah.
we're right on track here.
I love that. So like obviously you grew up in the church then. Did that affect any of your spiritual awakening? Like I've seen you talk about the Bible and how that kind of plays into your views on things. Um, I know for a lot of people it's been kind of challenging maybe reconciling things with the church. Like
Mm-hmm.
where's your stance with that? Like
Oh my gosh. I read this. There's this grimoire, like, I don't know if you read it. It's Abramelin the Mage. It's,
mm,
but he has this warning in it. And before, it's like this massive ritual. There's actually a Hollywood movie about it. It's really interesting. But
yeah.
there's this one passage where he talks about do not forsake the religion that you grow up in, because at some point on your spiritual journey, you're going to have to come back and reconcile that. And if you have this ego block against it, like this is trash, when you sort of realize that sort of metaphor of like, oh, it's all one elephant and we're just like grabbing different pieces of the elephant, you're going to have to reconcile that. So for me, I definitely kind of was, I was in. Like my
Mhm.
sort of ego identification attachment was like I was deep into the church idea, regardless of my sort of issues. I desperately wanted to sort of understand and make that work. And later in life, it did become a challenge because I'm like, this doesn't, my understanding didn't really hold a lot of water for me. Uh, it wasn't holding up to like the logic of common sense.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? Like it wasn't, it was like kind of like I was like, I don't, it wasn't answering questions that were just basic kind of questions. And I remember actually, I can remember it like literally yesterday. I guess one of the bigger kind of awakening moments for me, the first thing my mind went to was like all of the Christian training, because I went to a private Christian school at one point. All of the Christian stuff all immediately made sense immediately. Like the entire
Hmm.
dogma was just like, oh, oh, like that's not the problem. The like everybody else's interpretation of this thing is the issue. It's solid. It's rock solid.
Yeah.
Even in its kind of tampered with form, it's still pretty great. So now I mean, some of the stuff. Me and my buddy, we study. One of our mentors is this guy named Mr. 2020. So we study, and he studies Neville Goddard, who's this Christian mystic. And sometimes, well, I mean, he just pulled up like Psalm 1 for me the other day, and I was just like, gosh, the people who wrote this thing would be considered geniuses among geniuses this day and age. Like it's the symbolism, but once again, you know, there's a certain degree of consciousness and
Yeah.
that you kind of need to kind of I like to kind of help translate that and give people little pieces where they can go, oh, you know, I never thought about it like this, and kind of move around that sort of ego identification.
Totally. Yeah. Because like I think when you boil it down, like God is love is like a pretty good, just like basic fundamental,
It's the
like,
bar.
right? And
Yeah,
I feel like that shows up in every religion I've seen, really, right? And
totally think so. Yeah.
Christianity, like, obviously has its downfalls and it's done some pretty shitty things. But at the same time, like, I remember going to Christian church camp and having like connections with the divine and like feeling enlightened for like the last night and feeling super connected as like an 8-year-old, right? So
Hmm.
it's like when you get to know like the real like vibe, the real vibration, the real feeling, it is just love, and whatever label you want to put on that, cool, you know?
That's super
But
interesting that you say that, because like I love the fact that you mentioned that experience, because I think that's what a lot of Christians attach to, right?
mhm,
But I think if you look at it from like say like a seven chakra system, right? A
mhm,
lot of that is sort of this gateway chakra opening and you having these experiences, but not understanding the sort of steps in between, right? You don't understand the entire system. It's just like you get this blast of spiritual energy and you're like, whoa, this is legit, but you don't know how you got there or how or the other things inside. So a lot of the work I do is trying to sort of make those connections so people can go, oh, this is something that's accessible to me on a daily basis. This is just what it is.
totally. Yeah. And it's funny because when I'm working with clients and stuff, it's hard to sometimes like work a certain deity in or like Christ into things, but I'll be like, this being showed up for you and it's from this specific religion, right? And I'm like, I don't know what I'm triggering. All I get is like an email and a name and an intention when I do work with people. And then we have our Zoom call afterwards. So it's always funny, like tiptoeing around, like, I don't know how you feel about Jesus showing up, but
That's
like he
amazing.
did. But it like it's kind of all the same thing on one level. So I work with lots of different beings, but um like trying to tiptoe around the kind of like triggers and ego that kind of have resulted from people's religious experiences. But
Hey man, yeah.
um, I don't think fully denouncing it's really the way either, because um, I've been really interested in like hands-on healing and things like that
Mm-hmm.
lately. and like Christians are supposed to be able to do hands-on healing by like invoking the power of Christ. And I'm like, that sounds like some badass like spiritual stuff right there, and really a way to like get out of suffering, right? So whatever spiritual practice you subscribe to or wherever you are in your awakening, like the idea that you can use this higher power of love and light to like actually heal people is like mind-blowing to me.
Right? Like I totally. That's so interesting. I find your work incredibly interesting to me. Just because
Thank
like
you.
it's just something that I didn't explore. I haven't explored a lot yet.
Mm.
And yeah, I'm just curious as to like working. I feel like a lot of interesting things must come up for you when you're working with different people, just from
Yeah.
like a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, it's a very creative space. There's a group of Mexican shamans in the Mayan tradition that talk about how the spirit world is reality and our physical 3D world is a dream world. And the more I do this work, the more I start to kind of subscribe to that idea. And it kind of makes when you're vibing in your like 3D physical life, like going to work and having a fight with your roommate or having a fight with your boyfriend or whatever the thing is, um, just feel a little bit more like a game. Like when you can kind of realize that, oh, we're creating our own reality. The spirit world's super cool, and you can pretty much do whatever you want in that mind space. Like it kind of turns the 3D physical into like, wow, I got to sign up to be here and I'm here for a reason.
Mm.
And I don't fully know what that reason is yet, but like it's really cool figuring it out and just knowing you're going to return to that state and you're going to get to do all the cool spirit world stuff. Like it's a beautiful space to live in where you can access that, but you can also like really enjoy your cup of coffee because you know what taste is. Like that's like, you know,
Yeah, yeah, I love that. It feels very. I love the fact that you bring it home to that idea that like, yeah, like it's enjoy that cup of coffee. Like it's such a delight that we get to be human. Like
yeah,
that's really cool. I think a lot of the time, especially, I mean, and this is sort of, I guess, the normal sort of pendulum swing. If you're in that sort of egoic identification, when you first get that first taste of ice cream, you're like, whoa, give me more, like give me more spirit. And I think a lot of the time there's that temptation to just be like, I'm just trying to open my third eye today. I don't like, and you just neglecting your life. Uh, so I love the groundedness of that. Like, yeah, that's cool. Like being human is dope.
it
Like,
is.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
And when you start to understand how time really works, like time outside the third dimension isn't linear. And so this idea of like ascending and therefore like reaching the highest level and like you won the game and you're never coming back and like I did it and I'm somehow like spiritually better than people or like now I'm an ascended master or something. I'm like pretty sure this gets boring. Like this is my working theory right now is that like if time doesn't really exist, if you end up back as like an ascended being, you probably get bored and come back as like the worst, you know, like
You know,
right?
like
Because
it's
why
gotta
not?
be. I love that because it's like I really the time thing is really interesting to me, and I'm glad we're kind of on time because I that's an interesting thing to try to sort of explain to people. You can't really explain that until you've sort of experienced the non-linearity of that and sort of kind of moved through it, and you're like, it really takes the sort of sting and the I guess for me it feels like it's like it really makes everything that's happening right now matter all the more
Yes.
because you could just like people. I think I did a podcast recently and she's like, yo, like what happens when you die? And I'm like, I don't care. Like it's not that like I'm sure. I mean, I've got some interesting ideas. We could spend all day doing that, but like I'm trying to just I find so much pleasure in such mundane things and just being here. There's so much gold in every single moment. I'm that's what I'm about. Cause that's gonna take care of itself. You know what I'm saying? Like if you could when you could jump around and creating universes and galaxies and stuff, like that's cool. But being human is
Right?
yeah.
Like I got in a tizzy today about paying taxes. Like, you know,
No.
it was like so low vibe because like starting a business this year, you have to file like your sales taxes. And I'm like, I don't know how to do that. And I was just like, like just like not having a good time. but it's like a fun reminder that like now I get to get on this call and have such a beautiful chat and get to share this with everyone who's listening, right? And so
Yeah.
they're nice counterbalances. But if I wasn't human, like taxes wouldn't exist. And like I could just snap my fingers and make something happen. Like when I go to the spirit world, like I just have to think something and it happens, right? Sometimes it takes
Hmm.
a little bit of time, but um like it makes the healing process really easy. And that's why I love doing the work I do. But like if I was in that state all the time, I think I'd get bored, you know?
Hmm.
Like so
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think death is anything to be feared, but I feel like we're all here for a reason and the world needs us right now. And yeah.
Yeah. I really, it's really interesting the mechanism, I guess the mechanism of TikTok of how sort of it works, because I've gotten to meet more people like you that I like really resonate with, than on any other like sort of platform or any other thing, because it's like, nah, like TikTok's like, this is it. You need that. And I'm like, oh yeah. Yeah. Like it's been really great to kind of sit there, especially if it's not something like that's like exactly kind of like you, but it's
Hmm.
exactly like you. I just that's what I felt like when I clicked your page the first time. I was like, we're here. I'm home.
Yeah. I felt that way about you too. And like sometimes I'll be cooking dinner and I'll tune into your lives and I'll be like, oh my gosh, Leona, you needed this right now. Like, it's like I kind of know what you're saying already, but my ego has pushed it totally to the side. And just even hearing you speak that as I'm like stirring my soup pot or something is like you can do this work for years and it's still nice to just have a reminder of like being mindful of checking in with yourself. I love when you talk about being triggered and like, oh, are we attaching to that story? Like, can you observe that? And I'm like, I know this, like I've heard this on so many places, but like I always forget. Like I always forget to detach. I get sucked right back into it. So like I love TikTok. I think the algorithm's been so kind to us in terms of showing people exactly what they want to see and actually giving people a platform to grow on too.
Yeah, for sure. Because it's, yeah, the organic growth of interesting content creators. And also, I think I love the space that it's different than YouTube in the fact that, like, trying to say that without dipping into something I don't want to. I don't know. I think for everything that I think could be kind of maybe a little harmful to somebody, there's like 10 accounts that are just like, okay, let's
Mhm.
bring that home, and let's maybe check out another perspective that you can resonate with. And I think people by and large start to sort of gravitate to those perspectives that are a little more I guess I'd say useful to them.
Yeah. And I love that people can just show up in their sweatpants or no makeup
Me
or
too.
just like pull out your phone. You don't even have to have a tripod up, like, and you can still reach people and make those meaningful connections. I think it's a really amazing tool, honestly. I know a lot of people don't like in my muggle life, like, don't like TikTok. They're like, oh, it's just dancing. And I'm like, so fun though. Like, if you just got on there, like, you'd start to connect with people and yeah, I love the spiritual stuff on there. It doesn't mean you can't find it on YouTube or other places, but
Yeah.
I just find they're a little bit more stale maybe, and like TikTok's just like a fresh approach. Love the
I think
15
people do
seconds.
have a bit of a creative freedom on it, and it gets kind of a little all over the place. But I noticed that for myself personally, because I think for a little bit over a year before that, I was kind of sharing on Instagram, and I noticed the second just being on TikTok, I was already like, hold up, like it was an immediate break in form. I was like, oh yeah, I don't have to do that. I can just do whatever I want. But you knew that, but you forgot, which is kind of like what you're saying, dude. I love the fact that like I can get to your page and it's like I know that, but needed to hear that today. Like
Yeah.
it's like that. It's for some reason like you're cut. I think, and I was talking to my friend Sarah about this. It's especially for people I who have sort of been sort of aware of the spiritual journey for a while. There's that big sort of a lot of the times ego, like I don't like I already know that. I know. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Everybody knows that. Yeah. And it's just it's that headspace. And it's really fun to observe that in myself when because my fiance, she'll be on TikTok and like pull up a video, and I'm like, that little thing will start chirping like, babe, I told you that yesterday. Like, what are you doing? Like, why? Like, she'll like send me a video, and I'm like, yeah, babe, I know already, but like secretly, like, oh no, this is actually super interesting.
Right. I love the dynamic with the two of you. Like I've seen a few lives where maybe she'll be like driving in the front seat and you're like in the back seat going live kind of a thing. And just like the little beautiful tips that she provides, and then you'll ask her opinion. And I think it's easy to put people, especially in the social media atmosphere, on a pedestal in this sense. But I love that we get to just hop on here and have a chat, or we get to just post 15-second clips or go live. And um, I think anyone who's listening, like, I'm so grateful you're following along. I'm so grateful you're listening. But like, we're people, right? Like,
Yeah.
we have our own thoughts and our own ideas and our own blocks and our own enlightenment, you know? So it's a beautiful mosaic to like watch all these different pieces come together. But just because we're talking about the spiritual awakening process, I hope no one's putting themselves down right now, like being like, oh, I haven't had an awakening, or I'm the
Oh,
worst, or you
yeah.
know, like
Yeah.
because like you and your fiance are such a good example of that, of like just nudging each other along and giving little pieces of feedback. And
How do
yeah.
you find that? Because I know, well, I guess probably something helpful to say to anybody on for today is like, if you are in a relationship, you are experiencing an awakening. uh, it's not saying it's going to be a challenge, but a lot of the time, a lot of those sort of challenges that kind of come with that, the first person that's going to catch that is your partner.
Yeah,
Uh,
I love it. I love a good direct feedback with love. Like I love that so much. My fiance lives in Mexico, and so I went to visit him a few trips back, and we had our first fight discussion. So we weren't like fighting, like yelling, but he was not happy with me.
mhm.
And I came back and everyone's like, how was your trip? And I was like, it was great. We got in a fight. We got in our first fight. And they were like, all my friends were confused. But I just loved that, because to me, that was a point in our relationship where I knew he could be straight up with me and he could ask for what he wanted from me. And it gave me the safety and the space to do the same with him. Right. Um, so I think relationships are great, especially when you get to that point where you can just be straight up with someone and be like, hey, I've noticed you do this thing. It makes me feel X, Y, and Z. The thing he was not mad, but like frustrated with, was I could never make a decision. So, because I just didn't care. I was just too mellow. I honestly didn't care. It wasn't like a trick. It wasn't like, where do you want to eat? Oh, I don't care, but I really wanted like pasta or something.
Yeah.
I just 100% did not care. But it made him really nervous because he felt like he was going to make the wrong choice and I was going to get mad at him because of his
Mhm.
past relationships. So it's such a cool moment where he could give me some feedback, and I was like, oh, well, if you actually want me to make decisions, I will awkwardly make them because I don't care, but I will. So the next morning at breakfast, after this like fight discussion, the waiter's like, do you want these tortillas or these tortillas? And I said, I don't care. And then he looked at me and I was like, I mean, we'll have the corn tortillas. Thank you so much. Gracias. Gracias. But it was nice because I'm like, when we have that open dialogue, like I can grow from that. Maybe me being so mellow is actually annoying sometimes. And maybe that's something for me to like think about when I go into these situations, you know?
I love that, dude. That makes me so curious because I definitely I'm you in the relationship. I'm not the like I don't play like I'm good. I love everything, babe. We're fine. And she I totally lean into that as a something, a challenge of myself. I'd say one of the best parts about my specific relationship is my fiance is definitely like the opposite. Like she's kind of
Mm-hmm.
the if there's a yin yang, she's the other one. Like I
Yeah.
am 100% like the divine feminine energy of this relationship, and she's like decisions, ideas, this, that. So I find it to be a great example because she's sort of so connected to being herself that I find that it's very easy for me to just kind of like emulate that, like, oh, well, there's a lesson, there's something that I can just kind of do and see like how that looks on me. And it's been really great because it kind of not delays, but gets rid of all that judgment, because I'm not like, I'm right, you're wrong. It's just like, oh, we're just different. And now I can be really curious as to like, okay, we're different. How are we different? Where are some ways that I'm like, maybe we could work on this? And where are some things that I can like, sort of emulate the things that I like about you? She's just a great example. And I love that about our relationship.
I love that too. Yeah, I'm assuming you two trigger each other too. I know me and my fiance
Constantly.
trigger each other, not all the time, but enough.
It's observing that is been great. Even especially quarantine has been interesting for us.
Yeah.
But observing that and immediately going and making it like I joke like she's the only spiritual practice I need. It's true,
True though.
right? Like,
In a lot of ways, that's true.
and observing like my sort of that sort of reaction, especially when you're so kind of opposing. A lot of the time, when those sort of triggers pop up, you want to react immediately because it feels like it's such an opposition of what you kind of want. But just on a basic level, immediately just going when I want to send that energy out at her, immediately just going no. Why? What's happening right now? Like, what's your deal? And becoming curious about my inner state it's a game changer, right? Because once my perception switches, it's like it's literally magic. Like if she's in like whatever kind of headspace, and I'm like, babe, you gotta I'm like stuck in some toxic positivity, like, babe, like you gotta like be positive, man. Like, and if I feel it coming out of my mouth and I check it and I just go in and just like know that's about me, she almost immediately switches. And it's just like the thing that was the problem, she's let it go. We're already back and running. And I'm like, it's about you. Me.
Always. I love that. Yeah, I think honestly, anyone who's working on an awakening or going through shadow work or anything, like look at the things that trigger you. Because that's where you find the biggest, quickest lessons to, yeah. And that's how we break down our patterns and our holds too. Is like if I get triggered by someone being selfish, like I like to look at the ways like, how am I being selfish? Not that selfish is always a bad thing. Sometimes we got to take time for ourselves, and that's a beautiful thing to do. But it's like usually when I'm judging someone else, I am judging myself. Right?
Every time. Every time.
Yeah.
Just
family members. Yeah.
Noticing that is massive. I love I'm doing a small series of just trying to get people to sort of notice, like, because I think there's that temptation, I think, to want to go like, I noticed it. Now what do I do? How do I fix it? What do I fix? How do I? And it's like, let's slow down. There's a lot to observe. Like there's a lot that's happening that we're not observing. And that, I think that's a muscle to kind of begin to notice it and become curious as to like, because once you see it, it's like, oh, well, that's a trigger. But there's so much like you were saying in shadow work, there's so much gold there. Whoa, there's my parents. My dad's dad did that to him. And there's all kinds of interesting things. And you're like, oh, I guess that's not really who I am. And like, cool, right? Like, I think that's noticing it is huge.
Yeah, I love that you said who I am, because recently I've really been getting into Shaman Durek's work, and he's been talking a lot about how if it's not of love and light, it's not really our true essence. And so using the ego as like a tool to see what the stories you're being told is, because your ego just redefines what your subconscious or conscious beliefs are. So it's just there to show you what you already believe. And that was like a mind-blowing thing to me, because I'm like, if you know who you are, which is a being of love and light or connected to the universe, whatever kind of resonates for wording there, you're like, whoa, I can just observe this. I can just give this a name. I can ask it why it's showing up. I can ask it what stories it's attached to. And then I can detach from that and reprogram my stories. Right?
Yeah, it's almost it's immediate too. It's like an immediate thing that happens when you let that go. I think the challenge for a lot of people though, especially if you're listening, is like when we say stuff like, like we're all connected, it's the universe is made of love. That's hard for people if you haven't experienced it. And I think that's sort of a challenge. And I know you can you can tell very quickly the sort of people sharing their journeys when it's like completely an intellectual understanding, and when it's something that they've actually experienced. When you actually sort of experience that, it's like it's one of the most indescribable, like love and light, bliss, joy. It doesn't do it justice. We're not even scratching at the surface. And I think that becoming curious, or like we were talking about, like letting go and just sort of noticing and observing things, it's a naturally emergent thing. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to get it from anywhere. It's the nature of being. Like, that's what it is. That's just, you know what I mean? I think that can be a bit of a mind trick, because when you're moving out of that sort of ego identification, where you're getting everything outside of yourself, the mind wants to go, well, where do I go get this love and light and bliss? And where do I get this eternal joy? And it's like, this is the opposite of what was happening. Less. Do less.
It's already who you are. And it's just really, I think there's like a profound peace with understanding that it's already you, right? When you're in that state of being, I kind of like, I'm a pretty kinesthetic person, so I just kind of feel warm in like my chest and my stomach, and my mind kind of just goes blank a little bit, but in like a nice, pleasant way. And it's literally just being. It's just existing, and I think everyone who just exists deserves good things, deserves love and light, is part of that. You can't have anything bigger than the force that created the universe, even on like a scientific spectrum, right? The Big Bang happened after intense gravity expanded. So what was that intense gravity compressing? If matter cannot be created or destroyed, like, right? So we're a part of that. Our consciousness is a part of that. So I think just, you don't have to do anything to get there. It's just really a waking up and a realizing and a getting back to what you already know on a deeper level.
I think I read Inner Engineering last week, and Sadhguru calls it a homecoming, which I really like. Like, I really rock with that. That's a bar.
Can you imagine like homecoming parties, but like spiritual homecoming parties, like a little awakening debut?
You cry. That's amazing.
I would love that.
That's everything, though. And I think that's why sort of the journey, the spiritual journey, is so sort of intense for people, is because it's like that, especially that first time when you kind of feel that, it's you're like, yo, why do I know this? I've been here before. Like this feels more real than reality. And I think that's a really sort of interesting thing. Like we were talking about the dream world. It's like, yo, nah, hold up. Like this is oh man. It's really indescribable. Like, I think that's why all the religions and stuff only point to its nature. Like the Judeo-Christian God is I am. It's like the nature of God is I am. It's beingness. It's like I can only kind of, but you can't. The second you describe the Tao, it's not the enduring and unchanging Tao. The second you name the name that can't be named, it's not the enduring and unchanging name. So I think pointing to being is a really, really great way to do that.
And if someone's stuck in their journey right now and listening to this, like, it's okay you're feeling stuck. Like, that's part of the process. Just by even existing on Earth at this time, existing in your life, doing what you're doing, is being. That's part of the divine being, right? So like, just try as hard as you can not to judge yourself if you're bogged down about taxes, or your ex texting someone, or like, we all have those moments, even if we're awakened or on the awakening path, where we get sucked into fear, or we get sucked into feeling down on ourselves, our ego.
Literally every day is I think that's sort of, you really just hit on probably maybe the more, I guess, helpful or useful thing about that journey, is the fact that, like, I think a lot of what happens in that journey is like, you want to attach to, like, oh, like I want to raise my vibration. I got to do this thing. And it's like, bro, do the dishes. Like, I think I made that video, but like, do the dishes. Like, everyday life provides you, I have a million, billion opportunities every single day in my normal, not trying to raise my kundalini to ridiculous heights day. Like, I just did an audition. I got to put up the taping like equipment in my room. Like that's enough for me to mindfully be present and do that is cool, man. Like it connects. It's the most connected thing, being present with what you're doing right now. And I think noticing that, especially when you want to get, like you said, that feeling of being stuck, man. That, like I feel it all the time. Like, what am I doing? Like,
I was feeling that earlier today. So
you know what I mean?
I try and be positive on TikTok and I try and be helpful on my social media platforms, but I think I've had a few posts where I'm just like, I'm a human and I am feeling human things. So like, please don't put me on a pedestal, please don't separate yourself from me as if I know so much and you know nothing, or I'm so enlightened and I'm not. Like, all that kind of stuff is not really helpful, right?
No, man. I love that, because I think I'd say that to people all the time, and especially my favorite thing to comment back when people are like, you've helped me so much, you're great. And I'm like, let's back that up. Like, let's talk about this logically. One of my mentors calls it the difference between causation and correlation. And when we're sort of living in that sort of cause and effect 3D idea, everything is cause and effect. So your mind wants to go, oh, I am the effect of this person's cause. Thank you, TikToker person, for helping me. I am the effect of that. But I try to remind people, I am just, if you get help from any of this, it's a correlation that you've already changed to help yourself. I'm just correlative to what you already know yourself to be, which, like when we talk about things like manifestation, it's like, that's the switch from being the effect of a cause to being the cause and the effect. Yeah. which is I think the switch, and I try to point that out to people as much as possible, but usually it's sometimes like, yo, like, no, man, like, it's all you, bro. And I'm like, it's really not. Like, I really understand that it's really all about you, and that's a crucial distinction that I really want people to understand.
Yeah. And I think even like whatever profession you're in, whatever you're doing, if you're going to school, whatever, like, just shine your light where you're at right now. Just be the best version of yourself and the most loving and compassionate towards yourself and towards others where you are, because that can change lives. Like, when I was a server, I would have these really quick, meaningful discussions with people by just authentically showing up as myself. And sometimes, like, I'd have people in tears at my diner, like, sobbing on me because they were having a rough day. And I just was like, I'm going to show up the best I can. And then, you had your days where people like yelled at you and you're like, I hate customer service, and you'd get bogged down again. Right. But like, you just show up wherever you're at. Like, if you're the garbage man, like, be the best garbage man you can be. Like put that garbage can back in a really nice spot so the wind doesn't blow it over. Like, just shine your light, like, whatever you're doing. And not like being a motivational speaker or being a garbage man, like, both are super valid existences.
Super important. First of all, you fully triggered me twice just now. First with the serving thing, but second with the garbage man thing. My mom still trolls me, and thank God I'm getting married now, and she doesn't have to tell another girlfriend, his first job he wanted was to be a garbage man because he said he wanted to clean up the world. It's her favorite, like, embarrass me story.
That is like the cutest thing, though. Like, that's some light worker stuff right there. Being like, I want to clean up the world. Like, that is exactly.
Like, it was always gonna be some version of this, I guess. But the server thing, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I saw your video the other day and I'm like, that was exactly my server experience, like, to a T. Like, going in, and it was such a great, I want to say probably maybe some of the biggest sort of gains spiritually for me was I was at this place, and every place ain't built the same. And specifically the energy there, I remember telling people, like, oh my God, the place is so low vibration. I can't stand it. Like, oh man, the customers and blah, 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 blah. And like, once again, like the thing like with my fiance, the second I was like, I made it about me, showing up as my most authentic self, being with people. Like you said, it was, I promise you, the whole place just switches. Like all the chefs who were unkind, a little crazy, rude, fell off, gone, 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 gone. The servers who were just like, just kind of whatever. It was just like they either got on board and were like there, or they just gone, gone, gone. Customers, same thing. The entire place transformed inside out. And like, I wasn't trying to do anything. I was just showing up, being my most like authentic self. The managers got promoted from inside. They were kind of on the same wavelength. And it was just like, it's about you. It's always about you. Oh man, and serving is the best example, because there are days when you go in and you're just like, I turned it into a ritual. I literally, there was a hallway that was leading up, and even like no matter what the day was doing, it would, by the time I hit this hallway, it was like, I called it the warm up, because I had I was telling myself this sort of story, like, oh, I gotta warm up when I get there, and then I'm gonna then I'll be ready to go for work. And I called this hallway the warm up, because it was like, it was a decision to be warm, to show up as my most full, alive, authentic self, no matter what was happening that day. Once I took this step, it was like, it's already done. And I walked that into my day, and it was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life.
Yeah. And it's funny too, because you'd think that being a server like 10 years after high school is like, in normal society, is considered like bad. Where's your life going? What career do you really want? I got all the tools I needed to get to where I am now.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I had an apartment fire and I was homeless, there was like fire chief that was visiting from Calgary to work on his boat, and he came in early in the morning every morning those 2 weeks where I was like going through the worst of it. And he knew all about asbestos. He had lung cancer from asbestos. He knew about the structure and the fire regulations and what I should expect from my like company. When I got a speeding ticket, like wrongly, I wasn't speeding the speed they said I was. There was a cop who was a friend of, like, I didn't know he was a cop. He just was a nice customer to me. But he told me how to fight that in court, So it's like just showing up as like my nicest, friendliest, most loving self just to random people meant that whenever I needed help, it was always there for me. Like I found one of my business partners. I have a side hustle from working at that place. So it's like everything I've needed has shown up from just being like, okay, this is what I'm doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
How can I make the best of it? And whenever I needed something, like a customer let me house it for them and like let me stay an extra month when I was going through the fire stuff. So it's like there's so many blessings that usually come out of the woodwork, I find, when you're just accepting and loving on yourself for being exactly where you are. Yeah.
Amen.
Right?
Amen. That's a crazy story, but like, yeah, that's awesome.
Obviously.
Right?
Yeah. But if I'd been like shitting on myself for being a server,
mm-hmm.
I probably wouldn't have shown up to those conversations in an inviting way where people were like, hey, I want to help this girl. She seems cool. Let's talk to her. Let's get to know her more,
It's easy. I mean, you know how easy it is to become that resistant sort of thing. I mean, if anything, you're presented with more opportunities serving every day than to dip back sort of into that, by the customers, by the people you work with. I found it so interesting to sort of track the other servers you work with, though, when they know that like them bringing that sort of negativity to you is not going to be reciprocated back. Like they know that no matter what it is, I'm going to just become curious about it. I'm not going to be like, overly positive. I'm like, oh, it's interesting that happened. What else is there? And they're just, so they stop complaining to you and you're like, oh, well, I guess that's what it is now.
Yeah. I love that.
I'm not the one.
Or even just like hate comments online. Like if someone's throwing hate your way and you're like, great, I'm so sorry you're going through something that makes you want to say that to someone, like, and you just are authentically yourself and you are showing up as the best version of yourself. Like no one's words can really penetrate you and hurt you if you're living from a place of like, I am deeply and unconditionally loved because I exist. Period. End of story. There's no more to it than that. Yeah.
Period. Like,
yeah.
I'm good. Thank you. Like I'm good. I I think I watched, I don't know if you follow Aura Vibrant on TikTok, but I watched one of her lives, and she had somebody in her live just going in, like and it was so interesting to watch. Like, she didn't miss a second because she was about to get off, and the person was just like, I don't even know what they were doing, but she was alive and curious, like, okay, let's talk about that. And it was just such a great moment of her not trying to make this person wrong, not trying to make this person feel terrible. It was just a genuine curiosity so that we can have a conversation. I don't know if you noticed, like, because something specifically for me, in my journey, when you start to kind of open up in these ways spiritually, I think sort of the responsibility that comes up is sort of that 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 spiritual ego is a monster, because it like there's nothing more challenging than dealing with somebody who understands the nature of paradox. And I call it the idea, like, oh, I can be right, quotes, air quotes for everybody listening, about anything. Like,
Yeah.
when you fully sort of realize that, the temptation to want to like jump into that idea is just like so I'm so mindful of that. Like, when somebody's sort of coming at me, to be like, stop. It's not about being right. That's not even, because it ceases to be interesting. You're like, it's not cool to be right. I'm not here to do that. You know what I mean? But just noticing that, if you're listening, if you're going through an awakening, there's a know everything phase.
Yeah. And it's funny because like I've been to meditation retreats all over the world working with an array of people, and some of them who are leading the retreats are still kind of like that. So I think it's really important not to make anyone your guru, in the sense of like, I don't mean an actual guru from like an ashram who that's their title, but I mean, like, don't put anyone on a pedestal as knowing more than you when you're not checking in with your own resonance and what works for you. Because like they can say like, oh, I'm not in fear, and then I watch them get into fear 2 hours later, right? Which is like human, right? But when people are like, oh, my ego died and like I never have any ego, I'm like, all I'm hearing right now is your ego. Because if you were to accept that you had some ego left still, that would just shatter your perception of yourself right now, right? So it's like, I think it's really important to have discernment and really look at who's telling you what information and see if it vibes with you before you accept it as real or false, you know?
100% discernment. That's the second time I've heard that word this week. Maybe that's for me. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I was reading Chagam Trungpa's book, Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, and he talks about that guru thing, and he's like, he suggests calling them spiritual friends. He's like, oh, like they're your spiritual friend, but if you don't know this guy Trungpa, he for the people listening, he's a dude who was this like classically trained monk, like out of Tibet, like just knows Buddhism like it ain't nothing to him. Like, it's just his world. And yet he's like an alcoholic, slept with the students, stopped wearing robes, he only wore suits. Because he really wanted to demystify this idea, like, y'all, like, it's don't put that pedestal up there, y'all, and honestly practice discernment, because it's when we aren't doing that we get into that weird sort of cult situation where people are just blindly following things, and that's never going to serve anybody, I don't think. It's I love the distinction of like, when we're sort of in this sort of from a 3D perspective, it's a lot of the reason that we're kind of a little caught up and you feel constricted is because you've been blindly taking everything. Oh, this is what my parents said. Oh, this is what society said. Oh, this is what my teacher said. And you're just kind of eating it non-thinkingly. Part of that spiritual journey is beginning to notice, oh, wait, like, what do I think? And becoming curious as to what resonates with you. Man, discernment. That's twice this week. Thank you. Yeah, that's
so good. Yeah, I think that's honestly the biggest thing in my spiritual journey, and I hope it's the biggest thing in most people's spiritual journey, because like, if you're not checking in with your own guidance system, like, are you awakening to yourself? Or are you awakening to outside forces, right? It's like, if something doesn't vibe with me, it might not be my time to learn that, or it might not be meant for me, right?
100%.
So knowing what feels good, or like however you check in. Like I'm running an intuition boot camp right now, and I know some people are like, you're always talking about feelings and I just don't feel anything. I'm like, well, hear something then, or see something. Like I say feel, but kind of whatever works for you. Spirit talks to you in your own language, whatever makes sense for you. But if something makes you feel awful and not in a self-reflective way, like, do you want to accept that, you know? Because
Mm-hmm.
like me having to level up and do my taxes is like growth. That is like awkward growth for me. It feels awful, but I know I can push through. Someone being like bigoted around me does not feel like who I am, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
like being like, I'm not going to accept that as true. Like I'm not going to accept that as my reality. I'm not going to accept that as what I'm willing to tolerate. Very different, right? So it's like figuring out what feels good for us based on like our own principles, values, what feels like it's meant to be in our lives. Yeah.
That's glorious. I love that you're doing. I almost said the intuition right when you're talking about it. I did see that you were running that boot camp.
Yeah.
That's so huge for people, man. Because what is it? I think that a lot of the questions, I know you get them all the time, is like, oh, like, how do I start this thing? What do I do? How am I gonna go about this thing? And as many resources as I want to like dole out, like, yo, check this out. This is whatever. This is what resonates with me. And I
Mm-hmm.
think I'm very judicious about like, this book's cool, but if you don't like it, like if it's not for you, it's not for you. You're gonna get something completely different than I did because that's your perspective. And
Mm.
trusting not just trusting, but honing like you're teaching in your thing is your intuition for that is massive.
Yeah.
That's damn near the whole thing. I mean, it's just really crucial to get clear about that because there's gonna be so much junk. If you thought there was a lot of junk in your like not spiritual journey, once you hit that spiritual, because I think for me, like I said, I didn't know I was on a spiritual journey. So the second I feel like I walked through the doorway into the spiritual shop, and it was just like, oh, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, Mystic Christianity, Kabbalah, and it was just like in that book I'm recommending, which is the opposite of what I was going to do. That book that I was talking about, Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, he talks about having a big, like a big closet of collected spiritual junk that you never got to because you were just collecting a bunch of stuff and not integrating and experiencing any of it. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that when you know your intuition, you can begin to cull that down and be like, what really resonates for me? And become curious about that.
Totally. Yeah. I read the Conversations with God book when I was in Europe as like a 20 something year old backpacking. And he talks about that in there is like this, the premise of the book is this guy's life was falling apart. He's typing on his computer, like, why do you hate me, God? And then his fingers start moving and starts typing out answers to his questions. So the whole series is like all these questions that all of us want to ask God, but like maybe we can't actually tune in and hear it yet, you know? And that's really how I knew that book resonated for me was we got to this part where it was like, well, like what book should I be reading? Like what should I be doing if I'm going to be spiritual? And the response in the book is like, well, it depends on what vibes with you. So like don't take anything as like your one truth. Go out and see all the truths and see what works for you. And you're like a reflection of me. So right.
Yeah.
Right. So like
Yeah.
if you want to take a little bit from I don't know, like Abraham Hicks, and then a little bit from Neil Donald Walsh, and then a little bit from a podcast, and then a little bit from your TikTok feed, and whatever, and mix it all together to something that actually is like working for you, like
Mhm.
an idea and a mindset and a belief system that works for you and makes you happier. You know, do
Yeah,
that. That's
what's
cool.
your thing? What works for you? Yeah, I love that. I love that because you really, yeah. I don't know if there's anything else you can do. Is but begin to cultivate that
Hmm.
and just becoming curious. And I think that for me, it's like that's served me the best. Um, yeah, it just feels better than trying to
Right?
squeeze myself. I know, and I think you start noticing really quickly when you start feeling like, well, I gotta do this, let me squeeze myself into this new thing that I found. And you're like, wait, what do you, we don't do this anymore. Like, stop. That's not it. Bye. Like,
Right?
it's cool. Maybe I'll come back. It's not forever, but like, not right now. What is it right now? My fiance came in and I was looking up a specific like technique. I'm not going to say it because somebody will attach and be like, it's terrible. But I was looking something up and she was just like, you got enough to do right now. Put that away. And she did it in a very loving way. I'm making it quick. She was like, you got enough to do. Not right now. And I was like, that was the message. Put it away. Got to work. It's
Totally. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, I've gone through phases where I'm like, I should meditate more, or I should pray more, or I should do yoga every day because it's so good for you. And it can be really good for you. But when it turns into a chore that you hate and your whole body's telling you not to do it, like, is that a spiritual practice at that point? Or is that a chore that you've created for yourself and put a spiritual label on it, right? Because sometimes like the most authentic thing I can do is like curl up in a ball and watch Netflix and eat like hot Cheetos and just like cry. Like sometimes that feels like so good, and other times I'm like, oh hell no, like I'm gonna go dance by the water and have fun with my friends, or like go make a TikTok where I'm dancing. But if you're not checking in with your own guidance system, like you might go eat the Cheetos when you really should be doing the yoga.
Yeah.
So that really building that, right?
Noticing that, I think what you said at first about the noticing the spiritual practice thing is massive. I've definitely been dealing with that a lot lately, and being like, is that what you want to do today? Is that really what you want to do today? Like, because it can get easy, especially I think that there's a temptation to start to attribute your spirituality, that state of beingness, to the practice, and being like, well, if I don't do this, then I won't be connected to spirit, and then I won't, and it's just like, oh really? That's what does it. It's the yoga, it's the meditation. And I love that you said that, because it's like, oh yeah, you're right.
Right?
It's not that.
It's not just that.
It's just me.
Yeah. It's like your ego can latch on to the spiritual like imagery or wording or whatever and make you think you're somehow less than if you're not doing X, Y, and Z. I think especially like if you're on Witch Talk or like scrolling on certain spiritual like TikTok feeds, if you're on one part of the algorithm, it's like, you shouldn't do this and don't do this and you need to do this. And one of the most common questions I get asked is like, I can't meditate. How do I meditate? And I'm like, do you want to meditate? Like, do you want to do that? And I'm assuming you mean meditating by clearing your mind, because I'm like, if you tried a guided meditation, because those are sweet. That's how I got into meditation, was like listening to someone take me places, which is essentially journeying pared down, which is essentially what I do in my business. So like,
amazing. Yeah. Obviously that works for you, right? Yeah. That resonates for you. There's walking meditation. There's so many. Yeah. I love the I think the people that I really resonate with on TikTok are definitely the ones on the side that are like, do you like that? Like, what's your thing? Like, I just want to know, like, what do I do? And it's just like, what do you want to do? First and foremost, let's have that conversation. And I love that you get to do those one-on-ones and be like, let's slow down. Because I find that I run into a lot of sort of unpacking for people, because it's like, well, this person says, if I don't do my shadow work with this journal that's specific and and I'm just like, what do you want?
Yeah. Right? I find that too, like with people who run like retreats or like online courses or like missionary trips or like a whole bunch of these like spiritual experiences. It's like, well, you have to do this, you have to cut out sugar, and you have to do this, and you have to do that, and you have to whatever. And like, because I've built my own intuition and I have my own relationship with like my spirit guides and like my own just inner knowing and everything, like I'll be like sitting at a lunch with someone who's channeling in quotation marks, and they're telling me to, like, I don't know, break up with my fiance, And I'm like, that's pretty drastic. Like, I don't know if that resonates for me. And I'll be like, okay, spirit guide, send me a sign. And the song on the radio at the restaurant will change, and it'll be like, they think you're crazy. And I'm like, do they think I'm crazy? Can you send me another song, like, just to confirm that this is how I'm getting this message right now? And then the song will switch, and it'll be another like confirming like song. And then I'll be like, hey, just like third time's a charm. Like, can you just send me one more just so I know? And this person is channeling, thinking that like they're bestowing their universal wisdom on me. And I'm like, you're just bestowing your opinion right now. And I'm connected enough to what I feel is right for me that I'm not going to like literally make a life-changing decision off of, you know, some other person's opinion at a lunch. Right. But like the whole
Yes.
like I'm gonna channel and tell you what you should do, like when you get a tarot card reading, when you connect with a healer, like just make sure you vibe with them, make sure that what they're
Yeah.
saying like hits home, makes you feel seen, because there's a difference between like having someone mirror something you're doing to you and having someone judge you. The mirror feels like love, feels like a loving
Yeah.
acceptance, I think, and the judgment just feels like you're telling me to do something.
Yeah, I think and I think you start noticing relatively quickly who are the people who are pointing you back at yourself, pointing you in
Mm-hmm.
the direction of you, and who are the ones who are just being like, "Well, this is what you're going to need to do today if you want to wake up. Okay, then look now. I know you have some fluoride toothpaste. Get rid of that right now. And then you're just like, no, like it's really interesting because I love one of my other mentors is big into ancestral work as well. And they are always pointing people back to themselves. Like, what comes up for you right now? Let's get curious about that. And I think that's a life changing intuition boot camp. What a great thing for people. Thank you for doing that. That's huge.
Yeah. It's funny because I released my like Meet Your Spirit Guides course, which is essentially how to like journey, like how to call in the spirits, open sacred space, how to have spiritual safety. And I was like, that's my basic offer in my business. And then we'll go up from there. And as I've gone forward, I'm like, this is way more complicated than I realized. So Intuition Bootcamp is like take two. Like, let's make this more accessible. Let's make this less scary. Let's make this less of a financial commitment. Let's just like really get down to like what's your language with the universe? Like how do you connect? And then we can go from there. World's your oyster after that. But it's been a learning experience, but a good one. Yeah.
So
Yeah. But my ideal goal working with the people in boot camp is like getting to a point where they wake up in the morning, they do their morning routine, and then they're like, where do I feel like getting coffee this morning? Do I feel like making it at home? Do I even feel like a coffee? Oh, my body's telling me no, it doesn't want coffee. I should just drink water. But maybe the morning before that, they wanted the coffee really badly, right? And then from there, it's like, okay, so I have a little bit of time before work. What am I going to do? Maybe they journal because that's what they feel like doing. But maybe they feel really drawn to go to a specific bookshop and like look at the spiritual section. And maybe they get drawn into a certain book, and that book leads them to a spiritual awakening that they would have never gotten to if they weren't just in receptive mode, whether that's hearing your guide speak, whether that's getting a feeling, whether that's just like a knowing of like, oh, I need to do this today. You know, that's
yes.
where the magic happens. That's where you manifest easier. That's where you get blessings coming in. That's where you get the triggers that are like the right triggers to get you to the right point. So yeah, really just making it like an everyday practice and really understanding like, oh, I'm really auditory. I'm never gonna see a ghost appear in front of me. I'm never gonna see like Jesus like pop up like that, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's not your thing, man. You remind me of Sadhguru's book, Inner Engineering. He talks about that. Like he's like, yo, here's some ideas, but really and truly, it's about listening to your own thing. Like, what do you? I mean, and I mean that's for food, that's for everything, and just trusting that. Like, your body's gonna tell you, you're gonna tell you what's right for you right now. And yeah, I love the way you described that because it just felt like ease,
Mm-hmm.
moving in a state of ease.
Yeah. And that's like when I'm in that state, that's when all the amazing stuff falls into my life. That's when I'm like driving somewhere, like maybe the beach. I'm like, oh, I really should go to the beach. And I have this idea like, hey, I should start a podcast. Hey, I could ask David. Hey, I could ask this person. Hey, I could do this. And it's like, that's where the magic happens in those moments of just being in the flow of things, right?
Totally agree.
Yeah. But this is why I'm so anti guru and anti putting people on a pedestal, because I'm like, I can go to spirit if you do a session with me and ask them what's best for you, but I'm never gonna know what's best for you. Like,
Right.
like you're gonna know what's best for you. Your spirit guides are gonna know what's best for you. And if you're having a hard time bridging that, you can hire me and I'll help you. Like, but yeah, even in the work I do, I'll sometimes like almost not mention something that doesn't seem important, and then I'll be like, oh yeah, there's this hat that I saw, describe the hat, and they like burst into tears like, oh my god, that was my grandfather's hunting hat, he wore it every like weekend, we'd go fishing together or something like that. And I'm like, weird, because to me it was just a weird hat like sitting in the desert in the spirit world, you know. And I'm like, I almost didn't mention it, but it seemed a little out of place. Like, there you go.
That's so funny.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
but like I wouldn't have known. So if I was like giving my opinion instead of giving them just a message, that would be not helpful at all. It would just be my own ego fluffing itself and charging money for it. So.
I think that a lot of the work that we do, definitely, it's one of the quickest ways to get you out of your way. You don't really have a choice. You can't. I can't get on a live if it's all about my crap. Like if it's all, you know what I mean? Like it's all about my stuff. It's just gonna, and you can feel that it feels like force. It's just like, this isn't it. And noticing that, and I think that's probably why I feel like what we do is such a gift, because it's like, in a lot of ways, we don't really have a choice.
Right? It's like, oh, our life works so much better if we're actually doing the good things for us. Like,
you know
we're
what
actually
I mean?
listening to our intuition. Like, oh.
Right. Like, it's like being constantly confronted with it. Like, oh yeah, nah. Like, no matter what, I know if I've set like a goal for myself to, like, I don't know, make like a TikTok a day. No matter what, at some point in that day, I'm gonna have to come back and be like, yep. Well, I didn't do any of this that I'm about to make this TikTok about all day. So I guess when I get done, that's what I'm doing.
Right. It's so funny because like I'll be like, listen to your intuition, listen to your spirit guides, and that is very good advice. But like I've directly disobeyed them, and then the shit always happens, and then like I have to take a moment of humility and be like, I didn't listen. That was totally on me. Like, you know, it's like we can have great advice, but it doesn't mean we always take it.
You know what I mean? I've shamelessly turned on my TikTok and just looked at it like, oh wait, oh yeah, how was it go? Man, I said that. Whew, okay, yeah, I should definitely do that today. That's a thing to do today. I stay away from like the whole channeling thing, but there are some times where I'm just like, yo, where did that come from? And I love the fact, I guess it's one of the more interestingly humbling things about what we do. It's like, so much of this has nothing to do with us. Like nothing to, it's really just something. And a lot of the time I appreciate that, because it just, I can become genuinely curious. I can surprise myself like, yo, wait, this was mad helpful for me today. I definitely need to listen to this. And I don't get stuck in that sort of ego cage. Like, I already know. Like, oh, you don't see this video I made 2 days ago? It's
like that's the basics. Like come back later when you've watched that.
You know what I mean? Like I'm never there, because it's just like every single day it's a constant check back in with like, who am I being right now?
Yeah. Have you found that it helps you in like your acting and progressing in your career or like your relationships and stuff when you're living from that point? Like, have you seen like the tangible like evidence for the people who are like, I don't know, this sounds too good to be true. I don't know.
Yeah, more so. I guess in the first place I became curious about it was in my relationship. Being sort of an oil and water nature, The way that we're able to communicate now is completely just on a different level. And I've noticed that. And then also, yeah, career wise, yeah, I have to literally like just, there's a certain degree of sort of presence, sort of specifically with acting. It's all about being. It's a state of being, and it's a really fun practice for me to be able to do that. But um, the personal thing, as far as just personal life in general, it I'm still like in the process of sort of like integrating that, but like understanding that a lot of this is going to create some distance for people. Like a lot of the time, I think people don't know what to do with things, which is a lot of the reason why I started sharing online, was to sort of begin to create some space for them to be like, you can take it or leave it. Cause I don't know about you, but like there was definitely that point where you want to just ear beat every single person that you meet. Where they're like, yo, green. And you're like, green chakras are great. Let me talk to you about the universe. And you're like, no, I was just saying the color. Yeah. But colors are, and you're just like, and they want to kill you. And you're like, what? I don't. So I definitely have found sharing online gives people the space to be like,
I'll just
oh,
scroll on or like rewatch 10 times.
you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, and that's something that I really appreciate, and I'm kind of learning, and it also gives me the sort of decompress, so I can just talk to you about your life and not have you wondering like, is he judging me because of my negativity right now? Like, it's like, nah, man, it is what it is, right? I love you for you,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah.
Yeah. Have you found that like certain people kind of fall out of your life the more you get into this path? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's sort of natural that the people that sort of resonate with you end up kind of sticking around.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I would say without any sort of uh desire. I mean, I guess, well, initially probably a little desire, but without trying to be like, oh, like I want you to know how much I've changed. Look at all the mala beads I can wear on my neck right now. Without any of that, there are people who have come into my life that obtained, like, who kind of exited and came back, who were like, hey, whoa, I just want you to know, like, either, hey man, that video you posted the other day, please keep doing that. Like, I had a kid from like elementary school. His mom taught me in elementary school, and he hit me up. I saw him at a FaceTime actually with a really good friend of mine, and he was like, "Hey man, I just want you to know," like, into camera. He's like, "Hey man, just keep doing what you're doing, bro. Like, I know like you're getting whatever. I don't know what the deal is, but like, just, you know, it's important." Like, and he was like so serious, and I was like, "Yo, this is," because you always. I mean, I went to a private Christian school. Like, it can get dicey from time to time, and it's great to have those moments too. So for as many people who have been like, bye,
Mm-hmm.
there have been just as many that have been like, yo, this is it. And also the people closest to you, you'll find that whatever your spiritual journey is not surprising. Like, what, it's just, you'll find that you're kind of becoming more of yourself. Your awareness expands of the more of you. So you're just being yourself. So some version of that self was always present. And the people in your life who know you the best are not surprised. Like, I can have a conversation with my mom about all of this weird stuff, and she doesn't understand a word I'm saying, but she understands completely and totally. She's like, exactly that. And I'm
Yeah.
like, and that's kind of a metaphor for everybody, I'd say. It's like, okay, yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And I found too that like as I've progressed, I've definitely triggered people and we've gone our separate ways. But in hindsight, once I have a little bit of distance and space from it, I'm like, oh, that wasn't serving me anyways. And so just being more of myself was what did it to like cause that rift, cause us to separate. But like it wasn't working and I was in denial about it anyways. So like why was I holding on to something? Because they're giving me their time and effort. I was giving them my time and effort for what? For essentially a lie that I was telling myself that this was
Yeah.
working, right? And like no hard feelings to them. Like I honestly, I hope they succeed. I wish them the best. But like there's certain things where I'm like, oh, that was time to let that go. Like they came into my life for a season or a reason, and bye. Like that's okay. Yeah.
Oh, the letting go of things. I think that it's really great to sort of notice the sort of nature of, that ego is to attach. We want to attach to things, and it's got to be forever, and it's solid, and it's this, and it's like allowing things to kind of flow. Whenever I've chosen to let go, if it comes back, it comes back, and a lot of the times it does, especially for somebody I actually genuinely care about.
Mm-hmm.
I have a buddy who's like really going through it, and he was sort of in that sort of depressive swing kind of before, it gets better, and it does. And me sort of being it's a lot. It can be a lot for him. So I noticed him sort of kind of distancing himself, but like now he's in my live sometimes, and he's texting me more, and we're like, okay, like it's not, and also I'm not forcing it on him as well, which is great. So yeah, man, it's I wouldn't have any of this any other way.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so beautiful too, the not forcing it on people thing. Like my business really started working better when I stopped trying to like go to parties and convince people that like they should get into spiritual work kind of a thing. Like, oh, what do you do? Oh, I do like spiritual work. Oh, what's that? And I'd tell them about it and they'd be like, I want to meet my power animal. I want to know who my spirit guide is. And then they wouldn't care 2 minutes later, right?
Right.
Never worked. I got very frustrated. But as soon as I decided, I was like, I'm just gonna be myself. I'm gonna put myself out there on TikTok. I'm gonna put myself out there on YouTube, like wherever you find me. And if people like it, that's cool. I'd love to work with them. It works so much better. And there's no like resistance of like convincing, like,
There's none of that stickiness when you let
yeah.
people kind of come to you. Gosh, if you build it, they will come. That's an underrated film, I guess. But yeah, I think when you do sort of just build it and you're just being yourself, and you're just being yourself, you're not doing anything, right? You're
Mhm.
not trying to like show them up and like, hey, oh, it's like it's the most natural thing to you, and you'll find whatever that is for you. Like you said earlier, like I loved you making the distinction that this is our thing, this is my thing, this is your thing, whatever that is for you. Being an accountant, an accountant.
For anyone who's not on TikTok, that is a reference to doing potentially judged professions and just calling yourself an accountant.
Accountant.
So no one asks questions.
Nobody asks questions when you say you're accountant, but like you can be an
Yeah.
artist you could be that. If that's your thing, that's your thing. If it's just whatever you care to place your attention on. I love the distinction of God being love, of kind of flipping that from like there's a hermetic idea of God is care, being what you care to place your attention on. It's what you love, and you will consistently, when things kind of get, when you run into obstacles, it's like the taxes thing, because you care to place your attention on this, because you love what you do. Now you're encouraged to press on, you're encouraged to figure it out, you're encouraged to do that. Whereas if you were out here trying to be, I don't know, like whatever it was that wasn't this,
A
you
literal
might,
accountant.
a
Like
literal account.
the bane of my existence.
Same. Literally, you're out here trying to be an accountant, you'd be like, "Oh man, I'm good." Like, nah, just it's not something you're willing to do. And I found it just, especially in the spiritual space, just sort of entrepreneurship and all the things that come with that. This wasn't something I love doing. There's no way. There's
Mm-hmm.
no way I do most of this shit.
It's vulnerable putting yourself out there. Um, like I always used to joke, it's like coming out of the broom closet. You know,
Yes,
like I was
yes.
so awkward. People would be like, so what do you do? Even now, like I still serve 1 day a week, just for fun. And my regulars will be like, so I hear you started a business. Like, what is it? And I'm like, I do have past life healings. Like, it's just like, they just like spit it out. And I'm like, do you want some coffee? And they're like, oh, cool. So it's like I still have to check myself and like be like, this is who I am. I'm not trying to convince them. It is
Mm.
okay. And I've had to give out like my number or like email on like the back of their receipt more times than not because they're actually interested in it. Um, but yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge talking about this stuff openly, I think.
Yeah, the closet thing was literally the question that one of my mentors asked me on his podcast. Is like, when did you come out of the spiritual closet? And I think that's it can be a challenge, especially if you're listening. Like, I want you to know, it's one of the biggest, weirdest things is, and for me, I do sort of identify as like a claircognizant, which is kind of just these massive sort of downloads of information very, very quickly, like big zip files. And if that's you, I understand that it can feel overwhelming and disconcerting, but beginning to integrate that can be incredibly, incredibly rewarding and fulfilling. But it does take a little bit of care in realizing that, like, I remember, I've had so many conversations with my fiance being like, I couldn't have thought this. There's no amount of thinking that would have made me go from A to like squiggly line, that I could have did. But so it's really interesting that when you settle into that and just start accepting that, this is just what it is now, how magical sort of existence becomes.
I love that. Yeah. And like, not everyone deserves your whole life story too. Like, there are people I will be very discreet about what I do with, because I have a knowing that they're not the right person to talk to about this. Like, just gonna, oh yeah, I do online coaching. So what do you do? Just flip it around. Cause like, it goes back to that like discernment, knowing yourself, knowing your truth, being in touch with your own intuition. Cause there's some people where I know it's my ego being like, don't say it, it's scary. And then there's some people where I'm like, no, I know this is not going to be a pleasant experience if I'm vulnerable with them,
Yeah,
But
this
when
is
you
going to
get
be
in
it for
that,
you.
yeah,
100% noticing that. And I love that you talked about, where I think we're back at discernment too, because that's a really powerful lesson to learn on your spiritual journey, is that like, it's kind of like Inception, when you start talking and you're changing the dream a bit too much, and the dream starts turning on you, or like in the Matrix when the agents pop up, because it's like you start noticing like, you're an agent, and there's no amount of anything that's going to change that right now. We're not even going to go there. That's okay, but we're not gonna do that. And I think that's a really great lesson.
Yeah. But I mean, if you're listening and you don't have very many friends in the spiritual community, like, I really encourage you to hop on TikTok or hop on Facebook or YouTube or whatever, and just start finding people who are just out there with it. Because even just watching other people live their truth is probably going to help you feel validated in what you already know is your truth. Yeah.
Because there's a lot of that, like, you feel crazy thing, and it's just like, sorry.
Yeah. Oh no, I didn't mean to cut you off either. But yeah, I'm just so glad I found you on TikTok, and I found lots of other amazing creators, because my spiritual community before that, love them, but like over 65-year-old white women was kind of like like my demographic, which, like, I love them dearly. They're beautiful people. But I'd go to these retreats, and like, I'm the youngest person there by like 30 years. And I can tell I'm like triggering people by just like existing as a young person.
Yes.
Yeah. So not all of them were triggered, but it's just like, it's so refreshing even just to see other people I can see myself in, just living authentically. Yeah.
Yeah, man. I think it's you hit the nail. It really is great to make a community. And I'm a sort of a bit of a recluse by nature. So realizing the importance of community, and also having people in my life who are, like, I guess you definitely count now, but who will pull me out of my hermit shell and be like, hey, humanity, come back. And relationships is really, I just thank God that I have people like that. My fiance does that. She's constantly yelling, people, like, remember. It's like community is incredibly helpful, especially on this journey. So yeah, I mean, even if it's just one person. I mean, I think, was it
think it's Kabbalah. You can't like, you study with a partner. Like you can't even do it without that. So it's just kind of having that other sort of anything to shoot these ideas off of, to have conversations with, to be curious with is incredibly helpful.
Yeah. And then when you're going through something too, you have someone to bounce ideas off of who gets it, you know. If someone's like, "How are you?" and I'm going through past life stuff or ancestral trauma, and they don't even understand the concept of ancestral trauma. Like, I don't want to have to go into like, so this is epigenetics and it's like coded on your DNA from your ancestors. So scientifically speaking, this is the thing, but also on a spiritual level, it's a thing. And like, I'm here to break down what my ancestors did and had done to them so that I can live a better life and pass that on to my children. Like, that's a whole, I'm no longer being supported. I'm like teaching a lesson, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's nice to have someone that you can just be like, yeah, I'm going through ancestral shit. And then they're like, oh, I did that last month. It is rough, but good on you.
Yeah. Yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. It's so beautiful. Yeah. Let's check what time it is here. How long have we been talking?
That was a hard hour and a half.
Hard hour and a half. I mean, I love it.
Solid. That's a solid.
Just so into it. I'm like, yes. Well, I've probably taken up most of your time. Do you have any like closing thoughts or anything you really want to hammer home with people? Like,
and I think we hit it. Instagram, TikTok, YouTube at Fauxtivational Speaker, FAUX Motivational Speaker.
It will also be linked for everyone watching or listening.
So. For sure. And yeah, man, I become curious, man. I think if you're on this journey, you're loved, you're supported, there is help for you, you're not going crazy. Like, there is love out there, and just ask and it's done. Like, I don't care what kind of day I'm having, what kind of whatever, somebody hits me and it's like, hey, like, what, we can figure it out. So just yeah, man. Oh, that was a meditation reminder. Yeah, man. It's yeah, just stay curious, stay fun.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, so you can find David or Fauxtivational Speaker on TikTok. You can find him on Instagram. I'll make sure I link all of that in the description of wherever you're watching or listening this from. Hey, beautiful soul. Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode. I encourage you to follow David, aka Fauxtivational Speaker, on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. He brings amazing content and really helps us all be a little more mindful. I love tuning into his lives and everything because it's a great reminder for me to be a little bit kinder to myself and just be a little bit more mindful in the way that I think and experience this world. So make sure you follow him there. Huge shout out to 9Life Music. Thank you so much for letting us use Polite Dear, the remix for our podcast. You can find 9Life Music on Instagram and Spotify, and just sending you the biggest internet hug, sending you so much love and light. Make sure you subscribe so you never miss a podcast. And I love you. Have a wonderful week, friends.